Here is a question mainstream history doesn't like to answer directly: why does ancient Egyptian civilization appear in the archaeological record almost fully formed, with organized writing, monumental stone architecture, a centralized government, and complex religious systems, without the long, messy trial-and-error period we'd expect from any young civilization? Most cultures show centuries of primitive pottery, crude tools, and simple villages before anything resembling a civilization emerges. Egypt barely gives us that. Within a remarkably short window, we go from small Nile settlements to a unified kingdom capable of building the step pyramid of Djoser, one of the most architecturally advanced structures in the ancient world. So today, we're walking through exactly what the evidence shows, what ancient Egyptians themselves believed about their own origins, and why this impossible beginning remains one of history's most debated puzzles. To understand how strange Egypt's rise really is, we have to look at what came before it. Around 6000 to 4000 BCE, the Nile Valley was home to scattered farming communities, the Badarian and Nakata cultures. These were fairly ordinary Neolithic societies: simple pottery, basic agriculture, small mud brick dwellings, modest burial customs. There's nothing in this period that predicts what comes next. No gradual increase in architectural ambition. No slow evolution of writing systems. No incremental steps toward centralized bureaucracy. Then, within just a few centuries, Egypt transforms into a unified state under the first pharaohs, around 3100 BCE, traditionally attributed to a ruler named Narmer. This unification event itself is strange. Upper and Lower Egypt, two culturally distinct regions, merge into a single kingdom with a shared symbolic language, a shared religious framework, and a shared administrative system. Almost as if the blueprint already existed and simply needed to be implemented. Here's where it gets genuinely fascinating. The ancient Egyptians themselves did not believe their civilization evolved gradually. They believed it was founded during a mythical era called Zep Tepi, the first time. According to their own religious texts, in this first time, the gods themselves ruled directly over Egypt, establishing the laws, the sacred order, Ma'at, the calendar, and the foundations of kingship. Only after this divine age ended did mortal pharaohs take over. But their entire legitimacy rested on the claim that they were continuing a system inherited, not invented. Egyptologists generally treat Zep Tepi as mythology, a legitimizing story pharaohs used to justify their divine right to rule, similar to origin myths in many other cultures. That's almost certainly at least part of the truth. Power structures throughout history have used sacred origin stories to cement authority. But it's worth sitting with the strangeness here. This isn't a culture that says, our ancestors slowly figured things out. This is a culture that insists its knowledge was received, complete, from an earlier source. Whether that's memory, metaphor, or myth is exactly the kind of question that keeps this topic alive. Writing systems, historically, evolve. Cuneiform in Mesopotamia started as simple pictographic tokens for counting goods and only gradually became a full phonetic writing system over many centuries. Chinese writing shows a similar gradual complexity curve. Egyptian hieroglyphics don't show that same messy evolution nearly as clearly. By the time of the earliest securely dated inscriptions, like the Narmer palette, around 3100 BCE, the system already includes phonetic elements, determinatives, and a structured grammar sophisticated enough to record royal names, titles, and historical events. There is earlier proto-writing. Some tags and symbols from Abydos push the date back further, but even accounting for that, the transition from symbol to structured writing system appears compressed compared to other ancient scripts. Some researchers argue this gap simply reflects missing preservation rather than a true, sudden, appearance, a fair and important caveat. Still, the pattern raises a legitimate question: are we missing centuries of intermediate evidence that simply hasn't survived, or did something about Egypt's development genuinely skip a normal step? Nowhere is this leap more visible than in architecture. Early Egyptian tombs were modest mud brick structures called mastabas, practical, low, rectangular structures. Then, around 2670 BCE, under the architect Imhotep, Egypt produces the step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, the first large-scale cut stone monument in human history. This is not a small incremental improvement. It represents a leap in engineering knowledge. Precision stone cutting at massive scale, structural load calculations, and an entirely new construction philosophy, seemingly appearing within a single generation. And Egypt doesn't stop there. Within roughly a century, they're building the Great Pyramid of Giza, a structure so precisely aligned to true north, and so massive in scale, that some of its engineering feats are still debated by modern architects and engineers today. Mainstream Egyptology explains this as the natural result of a newly centralized state mobilizing enormous labor forces, combined with genuine architectural genius from figures like Imhotep, a completely reasonable explanation. But the sheer speed of the transition, from mud brick tombs to the most precise stone structure on Earth in a matter of decades, still strikes many as a leap that seems to defy the normal, gradual accumulation of skill seen elsewhere. It's worth returning to how the Egyptians talked about their own past, because it tells us something important about the culture, even treated as symbolic rather than literal history. Priests in later periods, including accounts relayed by Greek historians like Herodotus and Manetho, described king lists stretching back tens of thousands of years, including long reigns attributed to gods and semi-divine rulers before any human pharaoh took the throne. Manetho's chronology, compiled in the 3rd century BCE from Egyptian temple records, places the divine dynasties in a deep, almost unimaginable past. Modern historians generally read these extended king lists as symbolic, ceremonial, or overlapping regional dynasties stacked sequentially rather than literal history, a reasonable and widely accepted explanation. But it's also true that a civilization obsessed with permanence and precise ritual accuracy chose, deliberately, to frame its own origin as ancient beyond memory, not as something their own ancestors built from scratch. So where does this leave us? There are two honest positions worth holding. The mainstream archaeological position is that Egypt's rise, while unusually fast, is explainable through known processes, gradual proto-writing we haven't fully recovered, cultural exchange with nearby regions, centralized political will, and a genuinely brilliant engineering tradition led by figures like Imhotep. Under this view, sudden is really just fast, but explicable. The other position, held by a mix of independent researchers and encouraged by Egypt's own mythology, is that we're missing chapters of the story. That the compressed timeline, the mythologized first time, and the sheer leap in technical sophistication point toward earlier knowledge that either predates our current record or was inherited from a source we haven't identified. Neither position has definitive proof strong enough to fully close the debate. And that tension is exactly why ancient Egypt remains one of the most discussed civilizations in the world, thousands of years after its first pharaoh took the throne. What we do know is this: within an extraordinarily short window, a collection of Nile Valley farming villages transformed into one of the most sophisticated, organized, and architecturally advanced civilizations the ancient world had ever seen, and they themselves insisted it wasn't something they built alone. So, do you think Egypt's rapid rise is fully explained by human ingenuity and organization, or is there still a missing chapter in the story? Drop your theory in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit subscribe for more investigations into history's greatest unanswered questions, and let us know which ancient mystery we should cover next. This is HistoraXen. Thanks for watching.